Welcome back to another edition of Autistic April for all your autism needs. We're on number 4 of 5 special episodes to mark Autism Awareness Day, which was on the 2nd of April. Before we begin, I'm Mika, and I usually make video essays on philosophy, politics and neurodiversity, all from a leftist autistic perspective. So subscribe and hit the bell if that sounds like stuff you like. Today is a really important episode as we're going to talk about ways that you, yourself, can help the autistic people in your life and in wider society in general. So with no further ado, what could workers do to accommodate their autistic colleagues?
I think the biggest accommodation workers could do to other autistic colleagues is really communication based, so less assumptions about what's going on and trying to engage in more like understanding why, because this could be like getting an odd reaction and not assuming that someone's like being rude or I don't know, something like that, or even just they work very differently. Like I know for me, my focus comes in and out, and so I can get a lot of stuff done, but I also have periods where I can't focus, and that can really cause problems in a work environment if people think you're slacking off. And so so I think that's a lot of it, is really just trying to minimize misunderstandings.
Well, first of all, unionize with the IWW or another militant union, because those unions will help enforce the already paltry disability regulations there are, or even better, stand in solidarity in order to, in your collective bargaining agreement, make sure that your workplace goes above and beyond the requirements of, whatever disability legislation there is. Utilize your power to get concessions to make it easier for autistic people. Use your power and unionize. And when you unionize, think about your disabled comrades. And also call wildcat strikes if there is any sort of ableism going about.
I think that would very much depend on the colleague, the job, all of that kind of stuff. I think that the option to work from home that we're seeing with, the situation, I don't want that to stop for people who that, for whom that benefits them. And I think that should have been a thing for a lot longer. And I think that's one of the things that in this whole, the situation that's been going on since, March of 2020, you know what I mean? I think that it's brought up that, a lot of these things that they told disabled people in general and neurodivergent people were impossible were totally possible. And I don't want to see those things go away after the situation.
What could bosses do to accommodate their autistic employees?
Trust us and allow us to play to our strengths. Bosses these days are always looking for generalists. If you're good at one thing, you're expected to be at least capable at everything. That's not how autistic minds or skill sets work. We often excel at certain tasks, but are correspondingly weak at others. Expecting us to perform tasks we're not suited to, while simultaneously being asked not to outshine our colleagues at those we excel at, not only makes our working lives unpleasant and unfulfilling, but also robs those bosses of the contribution we could be making.
I guess I'd add, beyond communication, is if you have the ability, since you're a boss, is thinking of resources or being very clear that help can be asked for or gotten. Because I think a lot of us learn to be resistant to ask for help because, unfortunately, it actually gets you in a lot of trouble in a lot of places. So I think that would be an important part.
Not put people in impossible situations or with impossible equipment. I had a bit of a meltdown at work once because I was asked to use this system that literally did not work, and the boss was just and just get it done. They wouldn't, it has to work. They wouldn't leave us with something that didn't work, but it didn't work. They did leave us with something that didn't work, and being told to do something that's impossible, I'm gonna have a meltdown, especially if it's a machine that I can't get to work. In general, I guess I would just say patience and chill vibes, because sometimes it's just, yeah.
How do you think allies can best help the community on a systemic level?
In the long term, our aim is obviously to raise awareness and acceptance of autistic potential and needs. But the barriers we face rest in public perception of what autism is. We're seen as incomplete, lesser people. Our voices sidelined as irrelevant because we supposedly don't understand the world. Even those of us who work tirelessly to tell the world about the reality of being autistic often get dismissed as anomalies, as the exceptions to the rule. Allies can help by encouraging others to accept our credibility and listen to what we have to say. Even now there are so-called autism experts telling the world things about us which are patently untrue. But they are believed, because they not only have that credibility already, but their words directly undermine ours. The more neurotypical people who fight by our side and help to raise our voices above the din of established autism dogma, the better the chance we have of being heard and making positive change.
You can do simple things like if you're making media content. Some autistic people have, some auditory issues and sometimes feel more comfortable having having closed caption or subtitles on. If you're a developer, develop a way on Twitch to have subtitles, not just for your closed caption, not just for the person who's streaming their voice, but also the voices of people on things like Discord or Zoom calls if you're streaming. It's simple things like that. If you're a market socialist or anyone who isn't for full commodity abolition, maybe ask yourself why that is. Why are you so hesitant to the ultimate disability liberation? And another thing you can do, and this is like step 0, is change your language. A good website on this, I don't know if Ponderful can include the link, but it's by, it's on a blog called Autistic Hoya. It's a lot of, it's a good list for a lot of ableist terms that, they aren't all slurs, but I personally suggest that, it's literally baby steps, but stop using words like moron, stupid, idiot, things like that, because language reflects the way you think. Another thing you're going to want to do also is just think in terms of accessibility. If you're an organizer, is the space you're renting accessible? Like, are there elevators? Are there ramps? Sometimes, you need to be patient with people, and other times, you need to be reflective of the fact that, maybe some people are just socially awkward and maybe need a bit of encouragement to speak up at meetings.
So the best way allies could help, I guess, on a systemic level would really be organizing in some fashion to push systemic change. So you'd be getting as many people together to force some sort of change, like in a work environment that could be unionizing and making sure everyone got better benefits, which could include protections. But yeah, I mean, if any systemic change, it's going to have to be things like that, where we're pushing political people, bosses, people who have more power in the system to make changes. And most of the changes are going to have to be things that help everybody to be able to organize enough to do that.
I think by following our lead, there are so many people who are allies who aren't listening to us. The phrase "nothing about us without us," but there are a lot of people who try to do things without us. And I think that, like, if there is policy that a lot of us are fighting for, to back us up, and especially to do that in ways that we might not be able to do very well because of our, neurodivergence.
What do you think healthcare providers could do to be more accessible?
I think healthcare providers could make environments quiet, calm and relaxing with low lighting, natural colours and little to no sensory stimuli. They could have separate sensory waiting rooms for anyone who craves sensory stimulation, have large autism-friendly or neurodiverse-friendly posters outside and inside their premises. It could also consider the fact that being on the spectrum and being neurodivergent is a common thing and should be accommodated as equally as neurotypicals are accommodated for. Furthermore, they could provide autistic patients with doctors and/or consultants that are either autistic or who are trained to communicate with and treat people on the spectrum as they desire. Lastly, healthcare providers could take an individualistic approach to their patients, as autism is a highly varied spectrum, and each and every one of us are different with different wants and needs in how our healthcare is handled.
They could stop reinforcing in kids this idea that disability is bad. Also, there shouldn't be this one rigid diagnostic criteria for autism. Be more sympathetic, believe us, believe disabled people when we say we have a disability. Sometimes bright lights or other noises which can be used for tests can be, triggering for autistic people. Just so much.
Okay, I really wish that healthcare providers, that doctors would understand that a lot of us have trauma, and this goes with disabilities in general. I wish that a lot of doctors understood that a lot of us have trauma with other doctors. So, we might be on edge. We might be maybe not like the sweetest, the most affable or agreeable, because it can be kind of like an overwhelming position. Also sensory wise, like hospitals, I'm sure there are a lot of neurodivergent people and autistic people who think some of the sensory things of hospitals are nice, but I've always found them really overwhelming. And then of course they're also tied with a lot of people's traumas and things. So I think that some sympathy for the fact that going to the doctor in itself can be a very difficult, potentially triggering event. I think that would be really, that's something like I wish my doctors knew when I'm going to a new doctor.
Healthcare providers could do a lot to be more accessible, whether that's finding better ways to contact them. Their websites and things are awful. Having to do most setups over phone or in person is really difficult. So a lot of just general accessibility things, I think. We're seeing some of this improve due to COVID, but it's still not great, and those probably aren't going to last, unfortunately, afterwards.
What do you wish people understood about autistic meltdowns?
The biggest thing I wish people understood is that it's not okay to tell an autistic person who's having a meltdown to just get over it or stop freaking out, because oftentimes this is an involuntary response on our part where there's something that triggers that flood of emotion, and sometimes intense stemming to where you can't control it. Like, there have been times where I can't control my body, or I'll just suddenly burst out crying and freaking out, and people won't be able to tell if it's a panic attack or something else. Let the person go through that, because what that meltdown is doing is it's helping them get out the emotions or anxiety or whatever it is that's setting those triggers off. That is how we get it out of our system. So if you're telling us not to do that, you're saying, hey, you doing that makes me uncomfortable. I recognize that, yes, maybe it's to help you, but like, I don't like feeling uncomfortable around people like you. So if you could just not, that would be great. Thank you. It's incredibly insensitive. And there are a lot of people who are not coming from an insensitive place when they do this. They genuinely believe that it's helpful to try to calm us down, to get us to stop. But the best thing that you can do for an autistic person, if you yourself are not autistic, let us have that meltdown. If you can, give us a space where we can have it away from others. For some of us, that makes us feel a little safer. And just that little act of solidarity really does mean the world, because things like stemming, things like meltdowns, these are very much seen by a lot of people in society as things that are not acceptable in public. In so many ways, we're still not allowed to be openly ourselves. And I think that's one of the biggest problems facing this community, is that if we're told that we can't express ourselves, then how are we supposed to get these things out of our system that need to come out? It's going to put us in an even more unhealthy place mentally. I don't think it's okay for neurotypical people to look at neurodivergent people and say, what you do makes me uncomfortable, therefore I want you to stop. Instead of looking at a neurodivergent person and saying, well, I don't understand what's happening, but I know that the way you process things is different than me, so therefore I can't understand. So it's probably best for me to try to understand and do what I can to help, instead of just trying to make you disappear, and do what I can so that way I don't have to be around behavior like that. It's really, really insulting, and I think it's something that we really need to work on as a community, and it's why I'm really excited for our activism over the next few years. I feel like we're seeing a tremendous rise in positive representation of autistic people. There are finally really popular YouTube channels by autistic creators who do an incredible job at portraying what life is like for us. And I think if we can just keep that going and get to a point where we can reach out to the neurotypical community and help them better understand what life is like for us and actually make meaningful changes to society, we will be on such a roll then. And God, I wish it was now, but we're not quite there, which is why the work we're doing right now is really important. So, hey.
That meltdowns are involuntary. and they always have a cause. Never discount that that cause could be you.
I think the main thing to understand about autistic meltdowns is just remembering that we don't want that. I think sometimes they can look like a tantrums being thrown, and it's always like it's a deeply frustrating and demeaning experience already. So when that kind of thing gets added on, like it really hurts.
Like, maybe understand that we're human too. You know, we shouldn't be attacked for it. You know, we shouldn't be like hospitalized or whatever.
What advice would you give to people who are in the room with someone having a meltdown?
Back off. Leave them alone and make the area safe. Remove any and all stimulus that you're able, and when they're calm enough, offer to escort them somewhere they can feel safe to recover. Never shout, never chastise, and never lay hands on them unless they're at definite risk of injuring themselves.
Either leave them be, or if you can, like, try to soothe them and just be there if you need, if they need them. It kind of depends upon the person.
Yeah, don't freak out a whole lot, because that makes it so much worse. I mean, like, if that is then giving you a meltdown, if you are able to, like, you know, remove yourself from the situation if you aren't going to be calm. Because when people, like, yell and stuff, then that's gonna make it worse. And, like, yelling at me to stop isn't gonna make me able to stop.
I mean, ideally, the advice would be, if you know someone who can have a meltdown, would be to find out from them how you can best support them ahead of time. It's kind of like you don't want to make your fire escape plan while the fire is already happening. And that can look different for different people. It could just be being nearby so they know you're there. Some people might want some deep pressure, like a hug or something like that, and some might not want anything. Like talking a lot and things like that, like, can add too much. So I guess in general, it's probably a good rule to minimize how much, like, sensory stuff you're adding. So not a lot of talking, things like that, unless it's something specific that you know that person enjoys or it might be comforting. So, and I guess with that, you know, any minimal things you are doing, just be knowing that, like, showing that, like, you're there and not frustrated or embarrassed by them. And it's more just, you're just there and you care about them.
I hope you enjoyed that very important episode, and in fact are not even listening to me now in a rush to change your ways to better accommodate your autistic friends and family. Aren't you? Well, you can start by supporting all the creators you've seen here today, including me, by liking and subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This video and all my videos are only possible thanks to the continued support of my patrons. If you enjoy my content, please consider signing up to become a patron for early releases, resources, and updates. Thank you to all of you who have already. It really means the world.